They tell stories about the Old West as if it was ruled only by the fastest gun. But the truth is far more dangerous, because the men who truly survived were not always the ones who pulled the trigger first. They were the ones who knew when not to pull it at all. And Bat Masterson was one of those men, a gunslinger who realized that power does not always come from the barrel of a revolver, but from knowing exactly when to show it and when to hide it. Bartholomew, Bat Masterson, was born into a world that did not forgive weakness. His early life was shaped by movement, uncertainty, and the constant need to adapt. His family drifted across the American frontier searching for opportunity. But like many pioneers, they found danger far more often than they found prosperity. From a young age, Bat learned that survival was not about brute force alone. It was about reading people, understanding risk, and choosing battles that could actually be won. Unlike many of the men who would later become legends, Masterson was not driven by rage or revenge. He was driven by calculation. He watched how violence worked in the frontier, how it created fear, how it built reputations, and how it destroyed men who relied on it too much. He understood that the West was not chaos, it was a system, and like any system, it rewarded those who knew how to manipulate it. Bat Masterson became a lawman not because he loved the law, but because he understood power. As sheriff of Ford County, Kansas, he walked into towns where criminals believed they ruled, and he made them realize that confidence was not the same as control. Masterson was calm, well-dressed, and seemingly unthreatening, which made his reputation even more dangerous. Men who underestimated him often did so only once. He did not need to fight often. His name did the work for him. In a land where reputation was currency, Masterson was rich. Yet beneath the polished image was a man who had survived more gunfights than most outlaws. He had killed. He had bled. He had watched friends die. But unlike others, he did not let those moments define him. He refused to become trapped by the violence of his past. Where men like Jesse James and Billy the Kid were consumed by their legends, Masterson learned how to escape his. As the frontier began to change, Bat Masterson was already adapting. He saw that the age of gunslingers was fading, replaced by newspapers, politics, and influence. And instead of fighting that change, he embraced it. He moved east. He became a journalist. He began shaping narratives instead of dodging bullets. While other outlaws died in dusty streets, Masterson reinvented himself in a world that valued words more than weapons. But the West never truly lets go of its legends. Even in New York, even in suits and press rooms, Bat Masterson carried the weight of his past. He was still the man who had faced down killers, still the man who knew how power really worked. And that knowledge made him dangerous in a different way, because when a man understands both violence and influence, he becomes something the world does not know how to control. And Bat Masterson was about to prove that the most powerful weapon in the American West was not a gun. It was a reputation. As Bat Masterson's reputation spread across the plains, something unusual happened in the towns he entered. Violence slowed down, not because men became kinder, but because they became careful. The West was full of killers, but it was short on men who could see the full board of the game. Masterson saw it clearly. He understood that every gunfight created ripples, that every bullet fired made someone somewhere want revenge, and that the fastest way to lose power was to rely on force alone. So he used fear strategically, the way a general uses artillery not to destroy everything, but to shape the battlefield before a single shot was ever needed. Ford County, Kansas was a brutal place when Masterson took over as sheriff. Dodge City was booming, filled with cowboys, gamblers, drifters, and professional troublemakers who believed no one could tell them what to do. Many lawmen before him had tried to rule with intimidation and died quickly for it. Masterson chose a different approach. He made sure that the men who caused the most chaos were the ones who felt the most watched. He gathered information. He built quiet alliances. He learned who owed who favors, who had debts, who had something to lose. By the time he needed to act, he already knew where the pressure points were. This made him terrifying in a way no gunslinger could be. You could outrun a revolver. You could not outrun influence. When Masterson spoke, people listened, not because he was loud, but because he was precise. He knew when to threaten and when to wait. And when violence did happen, it was swift and final, leaving no doubt about where power rested. Yet Masterson never forgot that he was living on borrowed time. The frontier was changing. Railroads were connecting towns. Newspapers were turning local events into national stories. The age of anonymous gunmen was ending. Masterson saw this shift coming and prepared for it while others pretended it was not happening. He knew that men who lived by the gun would eventually die by it, or be buried by the new world that no longer needed them. So he began to cultivate something far more valuable than fear: visibility. He befriended journalists. He told stories. He framed events in ways that made him seem reasonable, restrained, and indispensable. While others built legends through blood, Masterson built his through narrative. He became known not just as a tough lawman, but as a smart one. And in America, smart men last longer than violent ones. If this story is changing the way you see the Old West, take a moment to support it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below whether you think intelligence or speed was the real key to survival on the frontier. By the time Masterson left Dodge City, he was not running from his past. He was stepping into a future few gunfighters could imagine. He traveled east, into the heart of American media and politics, where words carried more power than bullets. There, he reinvented himself as a writer, a sports journalist, and a public figure. Many assumed he had gone soft. They were wrong. He had simply changed weapons. In New York, Masterson advised politicians, influenced public opinion, and continued to shape the stories Americans told about themselves. He became a bridge between the violent frontier and the modern nation that rose from it. Unlike so many of his contemporaries, he did not fade into obscurity or die in a ditch. He adapted, and that adaptation made him more dangerous than ever. But no matter how far he traveled, the West followed him. Its grudges, its ghosts, its unfinished business. And eventually, those ghosts would come calling. As Bat Masterson settled into his new life in the East, something strange happened. The Old West did not fade behind him. It followed him like a shadow, stitched into his reputation, whispered in every room he entered. To the people of New York, he was not just a journalist. He was the living embodiment of a dying frontier. A man who had survived the lawless plains and walked into civilization with stories written in blood. And that made him both fascinating and dangerous. Masterson understood this better than anyone. He knew that people wanted to hear about gunfights, outlaws, and dusty streets. They wanted the romance of danger without the risk of living it. And so he gave them what they wanted. But on his terms. Through his writing, he shaped how America remembered the West. He decided which men were heroes and which were fools. He did something no gunfighter had ever done before. He controlled the myth. While men like Billy the Kid and Jesse James were frozen in time by their deaths, Masterson was alive, rewriting history in real time. He softened some stories. He sharpened others. He made sure that the men who had ruled by chaos looked reckless, while those who had enforced order looked strong. In doing so, he protected not only his own legacy, but the idea that the West had been tamed by intelligence, not just violence. But this new kind of power created enemies of a different sort. Politicians resented his influence. Journalists envied his credibility. Old rivals from the frontier did not like seeing him celebrated while they were forgotten. The battlefield had changed, but the hostility had not. Masterson found himself navigating a world where reputations could be destroyed with ink just as easily as bullets. Yet he thrived. He advised presidents. He walked into rooms where decisions were made that shaped the nation. The same man who once stared down gunmen in Dodge City now stared down political power brokers in Washington and New York. And in many ways, the latter were more dangerous. Still, Masterson never fully escaped the past. He was haunted by the men who had died, by the violence he had survived, by the West he had helped close. The modern world rewarded him, but it did not erase the memories. And those memories gave him a strange authority. He was not naive. He knew what disorder looked like. He knew what happened when law failed. As America moved further away from its frontier roots, Masterson stood as a reminder of what it had taken to get there. A reminder that civilization was not born gently, but carved out of chaos by men who were willing to do what others could not. But even the most adaptable men must eventually face time. And time was beginning to catch up with Bat Masterson. Bat Masterson did not die in a gunfight. That alone makes him different from almost every legend of the American West. He did not fall in the dust with a revolver in his hand or blood on his boots. He died quietly in 1921, sitting at his desk in New York City, a journalist, a man of words, not weapons. And in that quiet ending lies the greatest truth about him. He was not just a survivor of the Old West. He was a man who outgrew it. While so many of his contemporaries were trapped by their reputations, Masterson had escaped his. Jesse James was killed by betrayal. Billy the Kid was frozen forever in youth. Doc Holliday died coughing in a hotel room. Pat Garrett was erased by history. Bat Masterson alone carried the frontier into the modern world and reshaped it into something he could live inside. That is a kind of victory few ever achieve. He understood something fundamental about America. The nation does not reward those who cling to the past. It rewards those who know when to let it go. Masterson knew when to holster his gun and pick up a pen, when to stop enforcing the law with violence and start shaping it with influence. He became a bridge between two Americas, the raw frontier and the industrial nation that followed it. And yet his story is not one of abandonment. He did not betray the West. He preserved it. Through his writing, his stories, his relationships with powerful men, Masterson ensured that the Old West would not be remembered only as chaos. He gave it structure, meaning, context. He showed that behind every gunfight was a reason, and behind every lawman was a man trying to hold something together. That is why Bat Masterson matters, not because he was the fastest, not because he was the deadliest, but because he was the smartest. He saw the storm before it arrived. He saw that the age of gunfighters was ending, and he chose not to be buried with it. In doing so, he left behind a lesson that reaches far beyond the frontier. Survival is not about strength alone. It is about adaptation. It is about knowing when to fight and when to change. If this story made you think about the Old West in a new way, take a moment now. Leave a like to support real American history told without fantasy. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of the men who truly shaped the frontier. And comment below, do you think Bat Masterson was wise for leaving the gun behind? Or should a legend always stay in the dust where it was made? Because the men who last are not always the ones who draw first. They are the ones who understand the future.